Hey guys, tonight we begin in a place where time barely moves and sound itself seems to hesitate. You're walking barefoot down a lantern lit path, the stones warm under your feet, the air thick with the scent of night blooming jasmine. The light glows golden against the leaves, and everything, even your thoughts, slows to a hush. This isn't the start of a war or a dramatic escape. It's just a garden, but it may be the most important garden you've never heard of. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge deeper into the garden of quiet, said to be planted by a long-forgotten empress who valued serenity more than silk spice or gold. The path splits around a still pond where koi fish nap beneath lily pads, utterly unbothered by your existence. You wonder how it was that serenity became power. And then remember that in some parts of the ancient world, a calm ruler was seen as a cosmic anchor. Wild emperors brought storms, peaceful ones sunshine, crops, harmony. A little further, you spot something strange: stone markers, every few paces each etched with a different shape. A feather, a raindrop, a flame. You realize they're not just decorative, they represent breathing patterns once used in daily walking meditations. You try matching your steps to the sequence. It feels silly at first, but then something shifts. Your breathing softens. Your limbs feel weightless. The feather was a clue all along. Historians still argue whether the garden belonged to the Tang dynasty or was an independent spiritual retreat. The oldest records call it the place between thoughts, which is vague, poetic, and probably accurate. Now you arrive at a modest pavilion with no guards, no banners, no ostentation, just silence and slow wind chimes made of hollowed bamboo. A monk appears, offers you warm water infused with plum blossom, and gestures to a wooden bench facing a small stone hill. This, he murmurs, is the hill of listening. You're not sure what that means, but you sit and sit. Minutes stretch like silk. In the quiet, you start to hear more than birds or wind. You hear your own mind, shedding layers like old robes. The monk taps a bell gently, barely audible, and tells you that thousands of years ago rulers would come here not to make decisions, but to dissolve them. No wise choice, he smiles, was made with a noisy mind. As night deepens, you stroll to a nearby grove where lanterns sway from cypress branches. Oddly, they hum faintly, as if each one carries a breath inside. A fringe theory claims these lanterns were made from silk, spun by insects fed only lotus nectar and lullabies. The science behind that is questionable. But honestly, would it even surprise you here? A firefly lands on your sleeve and lingers there, glowing like it's content to join your pace. You've had busier days, you've had louder days, but this might be the first time in years that your mind doesn't feel like a machine. And as you step past the final lantern down a corridor of whispering reeds, the garden fades behind you like a dream you're still half inside. You follow the path as it narrows, the reeds brushing gently against your arms, like the soft pages of a book that's forgotten how to close. The breeze has stilled, and in its absence, you notice something even more peculiar. The silence isn't empty. It's dense, as if it's being curated. You emerge into a stone courtyard carved into the hillside, completely open to the sky. Moonlight glides across the floor like spilled milk, revealing circular patterns in the tile, ancient symbols for breath, pause, breath again. You blink, unsure whether they're etched or simply implied. Ahead, a doorway frames nothing but darkness. No guards, no sign, just a faint warmth seeping from within. You step inside. The air changes. It's cooler, thinner, but not unpleasant. Smells of parchment, sandalwood, and something faintly metallic. You descend 5 shallow steps and arrive at what can only be described as a library built for silence. Its enormous rows and rows of thin wooden shelves, scrolls tucked neatly like sleeping children. But what's most striking is the sound, or lack thereof. Not even your footsteps echo. It's as if the walls themselves absorb intent. A low platform at the center, holds a single chair carved from dark cedar worn smooth. A man sits in it, eyes closed, fingers resting lightly on a bowl-shaped stone. You don't speak something about this place suggests that words are discouraged or maybe forgotten altogether. Instead, the man gestures you forward and points to a scroll nearby. You unroll it slowly. There's no text, just small repeating glyphs wave breath spiral flame. It looks more like sheet music for the lungs. The man opens his eyes and finally whispers, each of these scrolls records a breath, a real one, taken in peace. You blink, a literal archive of exhalations. Historians still debate whether this was metaphor spiritual practice or some forgotten form of meditative data collection. Either way, it's mesmerizing. He tells you the practice was once common among temple scribes in East Asia and northern India, a breath recorded each day before speaking, writing, or praying. Some scrolls, he says, belong to the same person over decades. You can hear their lives in the pauses he adds with a faint smile. He invites you to listen, not with ears, but with your own breath. You place your fingers gently on one scroll, and without knowing how you inhale at its rhythm, slow rising, then still. The room seems to breathe with you. And now the fun fact you didn't see coming, some scrolls contain double breaths, irregular rhythms recorded during moments of nervousness, laughter, or hiccups. One even appears to catalog someone's snoring. The scholars didn't exclude it. All breath is sacred. The archivist shrugs. You spend some time, though. You lose track of how much exploring the shelves. One scroll was recorded by a woman who only breathed near flowering trees. Another was made by a boy who mimicked the inhale-exhale of frogs during monsoon season. There's a small debate about whether these scrolls were ever used in courts to determine emotional truth, sort of like ancient polygraphs made of peace. The evidence is thin, but the idea lingers a world where people were judged not by words, but by breath. You're handed a fresh sheet of paper and a brush. The man nods. You center yourself and draw your breath, slowly, carefully, spiral, flame, wave, then pause. He takes the page when you're done and stores it among the others. You've become part of the library, and as you turn to leave, the silence doesn't follow you. It stays behind, folding your breath into its collection, a whisper among 1,000 others. You step back out into the night, which now smells faintly of rain that hasn't fallen yet. The stones beneath your feet feel warmer than they should, as if they remember the sun and are gently offering you its memory. The path veers toward a wooden bridge, barely lit, swaying over a narrow stream that babbles like it's telling secrets to the moss-covered rocks. You cross it slowly, and on the other side, the landscape opens into a wide courtyard shrouded in mist. Lanterns hang low here, glowing like sleepy fireflies suspended in silk. A young woman in layered robes waits beside a small pavilion. She doesn't speak, but you notice her hands, elegant, practiced carefully folding cloth napkins shaped like plum blossoms. A copper kettle steams nearby. The water hasn't yet boiled, because as you'll learn, nothing here is rushed, not even water. Welcome to one of the quietest tea ceremonies in recorded history. According to the fading inscriptions nearby, this place once hosted the Empress of the Northern Valleys. No one remembers her name, just her rituals. She was known to prepare tea in total silence, even during political negotiations. One envoy once fainted from the pressure of having to sip respectfully for 4 hours straight. You're given a cushion. Better settle in. As the woman gestures for you to sit, she prepares each step of the ceremony with exaggerated slowness. The bowl is turned 3 times. The matcha is sifted through silk, not mesh. The whisk is carved from a single bamboo stalk with 100 prongs each, named after a flower. You want to laugh, but also, you kind of get it. This is peace precisely constructed. One blink too fast and you'll miss it. Your host pours the tea into a cracked porcelain cup. The sound of the water meeting ceramic is practically music. You take the first sip and it's confusingly perfect. Neither hot nor cold, bitter nor sweet. It just is. Like drinking a feeling you haven't had since childhood. Maybe this is what neutral joy tastes like. Historians still argue whether this ceremony was purely meditative or a coded form of political resistance. Some believe the empress used the slowness to control the pace of court-forcing ministers to adapt to her rhythm, a kind of power wielded with porcelain and quiet eye contact. Not a bad tactic. Your second cup is served with a rice wafer shaped like a sleeping crane. You're warned silently not to eat it all in one bite. You don't, of course, because you've learned by now here everything matters. Here's a delightfully fringe detail. This particular tea house has a floor made of alternating cedar and compressed moth wings. Supposedly, it makes footsteps sound like rustling silk. And you have to admit, when someone walks behind you, it feels like sound itself is shy. A breeze lifts the mist briefly, and for just a moment you spot an older woman sketching something at the far edge of the pavilion. She's drawing steam, not the teacups, not the people, just the way steam curls. An entire scroll dedicated to it. You want to ask her why, but you already know the answer. Because she can. Because steam doesn't last, and someone has to remember it. The woman refills your cup one last time. You bow slightly. She returns it, and for the first time tonight, smiles not with her mouth but with the angle of her head, like the moon peeking from behind a cloud. As you rise, you realize the tea didn't just calm you, it adjusted your internal clock. You feel like you've been here for days, or maybe no time at all. You exit slowly, brushing past a beaded curtain that jingles with the tiniest chime tuned according to a local legend, to the exact key of a baby's sigh. Probably nonsense. Still, kind of beautiful. The tea stays with you long after you've walked away. Not on your tongue, but in the rhythm of your breath, the looseness of your limbs, the way your thoughts now float instead of crash. And as the courtyard disappears behind a curtain of fog, you think maybe tomorrow you'll drink a little slower too. The fog folds around you like a silk shawl, warm and a little damp with the smell of moss and old paper. You walk slowly now, your pace instinctively matching the rhythm of the tea you just drank. No need to hurry. No need to think ahead. The path, as always in this place, leads only where it needs to. The landscape opens into a clearing beneath a giant banyan tree, its roots thick as a dragon's back, tangled and old. Moonlight filters through its canopy and ribbons, and nestled beneath its arching limbs sits a small wooden bench, barely more than a plank, balanced across two stones. You ease down onto it, and just as you do, a breeze lifts one of the banyan's hanging roots. Behind it, a small wooden box. You pull it gently free. It creaks open to reveal a stack of scrolls, each tied with thread, dyed the color of the sky at different times of day. Dawn rose, midday blue, twilight gray. The parchment is brittle but intact. And then you notice the seal, a single character repeated again and again, the ancient glyph for pause. The first scroll you open is short, just 7 lines of sparse, deliberate poetry. A haiku. It speaks of water waiting in a spoon, of wind that forgets your name, of a bird unsure whether to fly or sleep. It feels unfinished. You open another, then another. They all seem to come from the same person, a poet known only as the Sleepless Feather. Little is known about them. Some say they were a monk. Others whisper they were a fugitive hiding from imperial scouts. But one thing's agreed on: they vanished mid-verse. Historians still argue whether the Sleepless Feather ever existed, or if the poems are part of an elaborate historical hoax created by bored scholars in the early Heian period. But either way, the scrolls are very real and very odd. One contains nothing but the word listen, written 72 times in descending sizes. Another is blank, except for a thumbprint and the faint scent of dry jasmine. But perhaps the strangest a scroll sealed in wax that instructs the reader not to open it until they've forgotten their own name. You put that one back without even thinking. You spend time, maybe minutes, maybe an hour, slowly unrolling these fragments, letting them unravel in your lap like falling leaves. Some speak of rain as if it were a person. Others reference dreams never dreamt. One ends with the haunting line, "I wrote this with one eye open and the other in sleep." Then tucked behind the last scroll you find a letter, this one addressed not to anyone but to the listener. That's you now. The words inside are careful, slow. "If you find these letters, know that I never sought to be found. My life was stitched from silence. My name will not remember itself, but my pauses live on hiding between your thoughts. Read slowly, breathe slower. It's unsigned, of course. Here's the quirky part. Some French scholars insist that the sleepless feather used a special ink made from nightshade berries boiled under a full moon. It supposedly vanishes in daylight and reappears only during storms. Modern chemistry remains unimpressed, but one researcher did report a scroll that whispered when unrolled near a cat. Naturally, peer review was not kind. Still, you're not here to verify. You're here to witness, to hold the soft weight of a voice that maybe never wanted to shout. You take one final scroll and carefully return the rest to the box, tying it shut with a thread of twilight gray. And as you rise from the bench beneath the banyan's outstretched arms, the air seems warmer, heavier, like the poems have re-entered the air, mixing with the breath of night. You don't say anything as you leave, not out of reverence, but because really, what could possibly follow a conversation with a ghost who only speaks in half-finished thoughts? Your footfalls are soundless on the moss, and as the banyan fades behind you, the wind picks up slightly, carrying the unmistakable scent of rain that knows exactly where it's going. The rain doesn't come, not yet. It just lingers in the air, thick and humming like a drum roll that refuses to end. You walk beneath the bowed branches of sleeping trees, their leaves slick with anticipation. Somewhere in the distance, a stream giggles quietly to itself, as if it's overheard something mildly inappropriate from a toad. You follow a path so narrow, it's probably only ever been used by deer or dreamers. Moss squishes underfoot. Then just ahead, you spot a faint flicker of movement, the glint of firelight caught in cloth. A small figure sits cross-legged beneath a stone archway carved into the cliffside. She's older than the hills, or maybe just very good at looking that way. Long gray braid hands weathered like driftwood, and eyes that gleam with the kind of quiet a mountain earns over centuries. She doesn't greet you. She just pats the empty mat beside her. You sit, because of course you do. In front of her, an enormous bolt of indigo fabric stretched between two carved poles. Her fingers move slowly, threading a silver needle with a strand so fine it looks like moonlight. She's sewing stars. Not symbols. Actual constellations, Orion, Cassiopeia, and others you've only seen on planetarium ceilings or cheap mugs. Used to be, she says, without looking at you, people knew how to wear the sky. Her voice is slow and raspy like a fire telling bedtime stories. This is the story of the hilltop seamstress, a woman believed to have lived in a Himalayan village. So high up, snow melted before it touched the ground. They called her the Sky Stitcher. Her work wasn't fashion, it was devotion. She sewed for monks, midwives, shepherds, and in one particularly legendary case, a wandering goat with prophetic dreams. You help hold the fabric as she threads her next stitch. She explains that every design must be sewn in silence. If you talk while stitching, she says the thread gets confused. Some historians still argue whether garments like these were used in rituals or simply decorative. But several ancient burial sites contain robes embroidered with star maps, complete with missing constellations, as if the sky had changed, or someone didn't finish the job. As she works, she tells you of nights when she swears the thread sews itself. When the sky's in the mood, she shrugs. Doesn't happen often. A gust of wind interrupts, and she gently lays the needle aside, letting the cloth ripple like a sail. You notice each star has a small dot beside it, slightly off-center. She explains those are dream anchors, tiny marks stitched to keep the dreamer tethered while they sleep beneath the garment. So they come back, she says, deadpan, even if they visit a stupid dream. You're not sure if she's joking. Honestly, she's not sure either. She offers you a scrap of leftover fabric and lets you try a stitch. Your thread immediately tangles into a chaotic blob. Ah, she nods, a very modern constellation. You laugh and she chuckles too, just once, just enough. Here's your fringe fact of the hour. There's a temple in northern Nepal where worshippers wear robes embroidered entirely with missing stars constellations that don't exist in any modern atlas. Some believe they represent forgotten mythologies. Others think they're simply artistic liberties taken by tailors with too much rice wine. You finish your sad little stitch. She pats your hand like you've just graduated from celestial kindergarten. And then she folds the enormous cloth with a reverence usually reserved for ancient scrolls or newborns. Before you leave, she hands you a single button carved from bone shaped like a crescent moon. Sew it into your dreams, she says. You don't question it. At this point, it feels completely reasonable. As you walk back down the path, the air shifts again. The tension breaks. First one drop, then another. The rain has arrived soft, whispering, harmless. The kind that doesn't soak. It just cools your shoulders and hushes your thoughts. And somewhere behind you, the sky stitcher hums a lullaby meant for clouds. The rain slicks the stone beneath your feet until it gleams like a river. And for a moment you wonder if you're walking on the sky the seamstress just finished sewing. The world feels upside down, or maybe it's right side up for the first time in a long while. You follow a covered walkway now strung with bells made of seashells and bone, each one tuned to a different kind of silence. Some ring only when you exhale. Others wait until you've forgotten they're there. At the end of the corridor, you reach a temple with no doors, no walls, just a low stone dais, and a series of tall incense urns, each one releasing a different fragrance into the slow morning air. The sun hasn't risen yet, but the darkness has softened. Blue hour. That in-between time where the world forgets what it was just doing. This is the temple without time, or more specifically, the temple without clocks. You step inside if inside is even the right word for a structure with no interior. And that's when you notice everyone here is barefoot, moving slowly, deliberately. Not because they're lazy, but because here, speed doesn't exist. The only rhythm is that of scent. A monk hands you a strip of thin parchment. On it is a symbol, a spiral inside a square. You're told to find the incense burner that matches the scent of that symbol. No hints, just your nose. You take a whiff. Clove no. Sandalwood closer. Jasmine almost. You wander among the urns inhaling gently until one stops you cold a mix of citrus and cedar and something you can't name. Time passes. Or doesn't. It doesn't matter. Monks here, it's said, once trained themselves to tell the hour purely by the way different incense blends burned. One mix was calibrated to last exactly 1 hour and 4 minutes, give or take the humidity and the ambition of the wind. Historians still debate whether this practice began as devotion or necessity. Some believe it started during a time of great conflict, when clocks were destroyed or outlawed, and people had to improvise peace. Others think it was just monks being monks. You know, turning everything into a spiritual metaphor. One scroll here describes a ritual where an entire day was measured by the taste of tea leaves, steeped at 7 distinct intervals, each one linked to a different incense blend. Breakfast didn't start until the rosemary burned out. Prayers began at chamomile. Evening meals arrived with vetiver and dusk. You're invited to sit with the others on woven mats. No one speaks. The only sound is the subtle crackle of burning powder and the gentle stirring of robes. You close your eyes and just listen. Then from somewhere behind you a gong rings. But it's not a gong. It's a breeze brushing through a hollow bronze tube strung in the ceiling. It sings faint melodic ancient. One monk smiles and mouths the words, "Third scent." You're told that in the old days, decisions weren't made based on urgency, but on aroma. An elder wouldn't sign a treaty until the amber had cooled, which could take days. Bureaucracy, absolutely, but what a delicious kind. And here's the quirky detail. One visitor's diary describes a failed monk who tried to invent mint time. The idea was to make the day go faster by using sharper scents. It didn't catch on. Too tingly. Before you leave a novice hands, you a tiny bottle sealed with wax. Your hour, she whispers. You take it, and inside just a few grains of some unknown incense, meant to burn exactly as long as you need whenever you need. You bow and no one bows back. That's not how it works here. Time, after all, only bows when you forget it exists. As you walk away, the incense smoke clings to your skin, your breath, your pulse. For the first time in forever, you're not late for anything. And the path ahead stretches calmly, waiting only when you do. Word count 1057. Awaiting continue. You said continue. ChatGPT said section 7. The scent of cedar still clings to your sleeves as the path draws you downward toward a narrow valley cradled by hills soft as sleeping animals. Fog hangs here too, but not the kind that obscures. This fog invites. It feels like memory, like someone has folded 1,000 lullabies into the air and let them steep. You walk slowly through high grass bent by dew, the blades brushing against your legs like shy cats. Ahead, you see a thread of silk strung between two trees, and then another and another, until a shimmering web of translucent fabric lines the path. Every strand bears faint hand-inked writing, but the ink is not in your language, not even in a recognizable script. You reach out to touch one. It sings. A soft melodic vibration hums against your skin. Not quite a note, not quite a word, just resonance. This is the Whisper Route, a lesser-known segment of the ancient Silk Road. Not for traders, not for armies, but for stories, specifically lullabies. You didn't read about this in school because this isn't in most history books, but scattered records suggest that for centuries, travelers and nomads carried lullabies between distant lands, wordless melodies, soft chants, soothing tales passed mouth to mouth, night to night, tent to temple. Peace had its own traffic, its own economy, and it moved in whispers. You follow the silken trail deeper into the trees, each strand releasing its own soft vibration when the wind moves through it. A woman sits nearby, her lap full of spools. She's old, of course, and her voice when she speaks is barely louder than the wind through grass. They used to bring lullabies here, to leave them, so the wind could carry them somewhere else. She hands you a thread and asks you to hum into it. You do, feeling extremely self-conscious until you notice hers vibrating in sympathy, like a tuning fork made of memory. Historians still argue whether these singing strands were an actual tradition or a poetic misinterpretation of textile trade customs. But a few strands preserved in desert caves do in fact carry traces of unusual uneven weaves, thought to mimic musical notation. One scroll suggests lullabies helped establish trust at trade posts. You didn't barter until your baby had stopped crying. Priorities. You pass a grove of trees hung with bells, each shaped like an ear. No clappers. They ring only when the wind carries sound into them. It's oddly soothing, like walking through an invisible choir of listening. And here's your quirky gem. In some regions, it was customary to bake lullabies into bread. Literally. Bakers would carve tiny notations into the crust, and families claimed that children slept better after eating it. Sound nutrition, maybe. Sound logic. Who knows? You're invited to sit by a woven mat beside the old woman. She hands you a shallow wooden bowl filled with warm rice milk and honey, the traditional offering to those who share lullabies. Not because you need nourishment, but because lullabies, like stories, require a pause, a breath. She tells you a tale or sings it of a man who tried to build a tower tall enough to whisper into the ear of the moon. He never finished it. But the moon flatter dipped low one night and taught his village the sound of sleep. Before you go, you're given a thread soaked in rose water. Tie it to a tree where you sleep, she says. The wind will remember you. You promise you will. You don't question the logic anymore. You step gently away, the strands humming faintly behind you. They don't cling. They don't beg you to stay. They just whisper their stories once, then trust you to carry them forward. And the wind, true to form, carries your hum somewhere unknown. The hills fall away behind you, and now the ground stretches wide and flat, the path dissolving into fine golden dust. It's so quiet here, you swear you can hear your own thoughts bumping into one another. Even the insects seem hesitant to chirp. A line of stone pillars appears ahead, each carved with looping script and strange little sun symbols. They guide you toward a low sandstone structure half sunken into the earth. No guards, no signs, just cool shadow and the faint scent of chamomile. You step inside and freeze. There are people sleeping, not just one or two, but rows of them curled on cushions beneath light linen sheets, breathing as one. The air is thick with stillness, broken only by the gentle rhythm of slumber. A cat lies stretched across one woman's legs, also asleep. Of course. You've arrived at the Nap Hall of the Pharaoh, an ancient Egyptian chamber dedicated not to burial or worship, but to rest. Real midday state sponsored napping. Yes, really. While mainstream history loves its pyramids and mummies, this little gem of a room almost never mentioned. But recent archaeological findings suggest some temples included rooms like this not for the priests, but for visiting citizens. The logic A rested people is a peaceful people. You step lightly between sleeping forms, marveling at the architecture. The walls are painted not with gods or war scenes, but clouds, cushions, and oversized cats. There's even a mural of what looks like someone napping while being fanned by a servant holding a palm frond in their mouth, hands-free comfort. Historians still argue whether these nap halls were widely used or merely ceremonial. But one inscription found here reads, "Those who sleep well anger no one," which honestly feels like a slogan worth reviving. You ease down onto a free cushion in the back corner. It's slightly warm, like someone just left it, and smells faintly of lavender and sun. Above you, the ceiling is painted with constellations that drift ever so slowly thanks to a clever series of mirrors and candlelight reflections. A gentle illusion of a sky always in motion. Time passes, even if your body doesn't. A servant enters barefoot silent and offers you a small clay cup of what smells like sweetened barley milk. You sip. It tastes like the nap you didn't know you needed. And here's your fringe fact of the hour. According to some fringe Egyptologists, one pharaoh reportedly canceled public meetings during heat waves and replaced them with mandatory citywide nap breaks. Entire neighborhoods would dim their lamps and nap simultaneously. A kind of quiet rebellion against the sun. You lie back. The cushion cradles you perfectly. You feel weightless, like your thoughts have taken off their shoes and are now walking barefoot through your mind. A bell chimes softly, but not to wake anyone. It's merely to mark the entrance of a dream priestess who walks among the sleeping, whispering blessings in a language lost to time. She pauses near you, places a hand gently on your shoulder, and mouths something that might mean sleep is also sacred. You don't sleep not fully, but you hover, half in, half out. The air grows heavier, sweeter. You swear the constellations shift faster when you exhale. Then a breath of wind rustles the linen curtains. It's time. You rise slowly, gently folding your blanket, and place the clay cup back near the wall. The others still sleep, unbothered, undisturbed. You step through the curtain back into sunlight. Your limbs loose, your pulse slow. The world hasn't changed, but you've softened, like clay after rain, like memory settling into still water. And behind you, the nap hall returns to its timeless hum. You emerge into the golden hush of late afternoon. The light is softer now, like it's walking on tiptoe across the landscape, careful not to wake anything. Your feet move instinctively toward a dirt path bordered by smooth river stones, the kind that have been weathered not just by water, but by the passage of unspoken stories. Ahead, a row of clay jars glimmers in the sun, each one carefully sealed, each one set beneath an arch of woven reeds. You hear voices not loud, not excited, just content. The kind of sound people make when no one is watching, when time doesn't bite at their heels. You've reached a village gathered around a single belief that dew collected under moonlight holds healing properties. They call it moon water. You're ushered gently into the gathering by an older man carrying a silver ladle. He dips it into one of the sealed jars and offers you a sip. It tastes like fog and mint and something slightly floral, like a secret your grandmother meant to tell you but forgot. The villagers explain with the calm certainty of bedtime that they rise before dawn to collect dew from leaves, grasses, and flower petals. Not just for drinking, but for washing hands, blessing homes, and even watering the roots of trees that grow near graves. Historians still debate whether moon water was ever a formal religious practice or simply a folk belief passed down with lullabies. Some records suggest moon water rituals were banned during certain dynastic reigns considered too soft to be holy. Others show emperors quietly requesting jars of it during illness. You follow the villagers to a high ridge where strips of linen are spread across a bamboo frame. They wait for dew to collect here not just water, but what they believe are dreams cooled and condensed by moonlight. One woman calls it sleep made visible. The community doesn't just drink it, they read it. Yes, read it. Using tiny mirrors and polished obsidian stones, they study the patterns left in the droplet shapes like feather spirals, sometimes tiny maps. You're handed a stone and invited to try. You stare into a drop. It reflects a version of you that seems slightly more rested, slightly more whole. Then comes the whisper-odd detail. Some villagers believe the dew changes depending on what the moon heard the night before. If there was laughter, the water tastes sweeter. If there was arguing, it goes sour. It's absolutely unscientific. And yet, you kind of believe it anyway. They hand you a glass vial, slender, etched with tiny moons along its neck, and let you collect a drop for yourself. One drop. That's the rule. You choose a violet petal resting in the grass, gently tilt it, and let the dew roll into your bottle. It's barely there, but it shimmers like melted starlight. Later in the village square, the oldest among them tells you a story, more of a whisper, really, about a girl who once gathered so much moon water she forgot how to speak. Words he shrugs just started to feel unnecessary. You're served a small bowl of rice, cooked over steam infused with moon water. It tastes kind. There's no other word for it. Kind. Here's your fringe fact. One 17th century sailor swore that drinking dew collected during a full moon's third hour of rising could prevent seasickness. He also claimed it made cats unusually affectionate. Modern historians are skeptical. Cats remain unimpressed. As you leave, the villagers don't say goodbye. Instead, they each lift their vials in a silent toast. You return the gesture, and the wind picks up just enough to make the linen strips above you sigh. You walk down the ridge, your single drop of moon water glowing faintly in your hand. And for the first time in a long while, you don't feel thirsty at all. The sky has deepened into a navy blue, now that hushed moment before stars begin to blink into being. You move downhill through whispering grass, the path barely visible, but intuitively familiar, as if your feet remember it from a dream you haven't had yet. Ahead, you spot a glimmer on the water. A lake perfectly still spreads out like a mirror, so calm it feels rude to approach. Yet anchored at the center is something truly unexpected. A floating library. Not a raft, not a boat with books. A full-on structure, serene and symmetrical, drifting silently like a thought someone forgot to write down. You reach a small dock where a man in a moss-green robe waves you aboard a narrow canoe. He rows without speaking, the oars barely disturbing the surface. You glide toward the library, which rises like a lotus wooden circular, ringed with lanterns. It casts no reflection. Inside, the air is dry, but fragrant aged paper rosemary and cedar oil. Shelves curve around the interior like tree rings, filled not just with books, but with scrolls, painted stones, carved tablets. But here's the twist: no one reads silently. In this place, stories are only experienced aloud. A woman greets you, hands you a soft-bound book, and gestures to a seat cushioned with woven reeds. When you open the book, the words shimmer not magically, but from age and care. You begin to read, quietly, then a little louder. The acoustics are so perfect, it sounds like you're whispering inside a seashell. One by one, others read too. No one interrupts. No one performs. The idea here is simple stories are meant to be heard, not processed silently, not hoarded, but shared gently like fire in a cold cave. Historians still argue whether such libraries existed. A few travel journals from the late 15th century describe floating halls of voice, often dismissed as metaphor. But one half-rotted manuscript from Southeast Asia contains boat schematics suspiciously shaped like this one. You pause in your reading and notice that the lanterns above flicker in response to tone. A soft passage causes them to dim, a joke makes them sparkle. It's subtle, hypnotic. And speaking of jokes, here's a gentle one buried in the margin of your book. Why did the philosopher fall asleep mid-thought? He wanted to finish it in his dreams. Not bad, considering it's at least 300 years old. A boy across the room reads from a scroll about cloud migration patterns and the secret lives of wind. He stumbles over a word, blushes. No one laughs. An older woman nods encouragingly, her voice following with a line from a different story about a fish who once learned to hum. Some books here are entirely blank. Listeners are encouraged to speak their own dreams into them. You try. You whisper something soft, private. The paper darkens slightly as if acknowledging the offering. And here's your fringe tidbit: local lore claims the library never docks in the same place twice. It floats on decisions where it's most needed, where stories are most forgotten. The librarians, not hired, chosen by the books themselves. You're given a parting gift, a single sentence handwritten on a cloth bookmark. Words drift, but voices root. You press it between the pages and close the book. The canoe returns without being summoned. As you drift away, you look back. The floating library glows gently, circling itself in reflected starlight. One lantern winks in your direction. Or maybe it's just the wind. And in your mind, you hear the faint echo of voices, not quite fading stories whispered across water, hoping someone will remember them whole. The canoe deposits you softly on the shore, your feet returning to land with the faintest resistance, like even the earth missed your weight. You step onto a gravel path framed by trees, bowed low. With time, their branches heavy with wind chimes. But these aren't the tinny, chaotic chimes from suburban porches. These are deeper, warmer tuned, not to wind, but to emotion. A man sits beneath one of the trees polishing a bell the color of old sandalwood. His eyes are pale and clouded, and it doesn't take long to realize he's blind. Yet his hands move with absolute certainty, brushing the edges of each chime, like he's reading a language only he can hear. He doesn't greet you. He just motions toward a small hammer lying beside him and gestures for you to ring one of the bells. You do. It rings not bright, not harsh, but soft and round, like the sound of someone remembering a happy memory they thought they'd forgotten. He nods. You're carrying some kindness today, he says. You're too surprised to respond, but honestly, it checks out. Welcome to the domain of the blind bell maker, a figure whispered about in bedtime legends and half-reliable oral histories. According to scraps of old records, this man, or at least this role, has existed in many cultures. A bellmaker who tunes chimes not by pitch but by feeling. Not to mark time but to shape it. Some believe these bells were hung outside children's windows, tuned to help lull them into different kinds of dreams, adventure, safety, forgiveness. One Egyptian scroll even claims a bellmaker crafted a set of tones that prevented nightmares during lunar eclipses. Historians still argue whether this was practical therapy or poetic wishful thinking. I call that one first steps, the bellmaker says. He hands you a small chime shaped like a curled leaf. Try tuning this, he says, but don't use your ears. You hold it between your palms, close your eyes, and gently adjust the string length until click something inside your body settles. It's subtle. You open your eyes. He's smiling. Good, he says. That one's tuned to your second most forgotten dream. You try to ask what the first one was, but he's already humming, dipping a bell into a basin of warm oil to deepen its tone. The smell is soothing frankincense, pine, and something sharp and bright like ginger. Here's your odd little detail of the evening in some mountain villages. It's believed that if a child sleeps under a bell tuned by sorrow, they'll wake with empathy. But if they sleep under one tuned by arrogance, they'll dream of being chased by goats. Aggressively. Apparently, it's very motivating. The bellmaker reaches into a pouch and pulls out a miniature chime, smaller than your thumb, carved from bone and bronze. This one's for carrying, he says. But don't ring it unless you're truly lost. Or very bored. You accept it solemnly, though a small part of you is dying to try it just for fun. He returns to his work, now tuning a bell shaped like a question mark. You begin to walk away, the path winding through trees, hung thick with his creations. Each breeze plays a different memory. One sounds like snow falling on an old roof, another like laughter in a deep cave. One, oddly enough, sounds exactly like a grandmother telling you not to forget your scarf. You step beyond the last tree, and the chimes fade behind you, blending back into the hush of the forest. And from your pocket, that tiny leaf-shaped bell hums once low, sweet, unmistakably yours. You step through the last of the bell-hung trees and into a space that feels cultivated. Not just tended, but designed as if someone had shaped the very night to be softer here. The scent hits you first. Night-blooming jasmine, damp earth, a hint of mint, and something you can't quite name like the memory of stone after rain. You walk into a garden, but not just any garden. This is a place built to sleep, not for people, not primarily at least. This is a garden for the world to sleep in. You enter through a gate no taller than your chest, its arch etched with glyphs that roughly translate to "Do not rush the bloom." Inside, the foliage is dense and strange. Flowers open only at night. Leaves curl not when touched, but when spoken to. Tiny bioluminescent fungi blink from the base of trees like shy stars. Welcome to the Sleeping Gardens, an ancient city project designed to shift with the sky, a whole district that only awakened after dusk. The stone paths are veined with moss. Lamps burn low with oil made from moonflowers. No loud colors, no sharp angles. Everything here has edges worn down by wind, footsteps, and time. Historians still argue whether this place was meant for religious reflection, psychological therapy, or just sheer aesthetic indulgence by a monarch with impeccable taste in landscaping. Some claim this garden was based on a forgotten theory that the earth, like the body, must have hours for silence, and this was her bedroom. You pause beside a bench shaped like a reclining animal, fox maybe. Or wolf? Hard to tell. Its back is lined with cushions, filled not with feathers, but with dried petals from the previous season. You sit. It exhales under your weight, like it's been waiting for you all week. A caretaker passes by, a young woman with silver-painted fingernails carrying a basket of closed buds. She waves, then scatters the buds into the soil along the path, whispering to each one as she does. You listen, and though you can't catch every word, the cadence is familiar. Lullaby meets prayer, meets gardening advice. You follow a winding trail lined with reflective stones, but there's no moon above, only clouds. The stones, however, still glow. They're etched with dream prompts meant to guide those who stroll the garden before sleep. What if your regrets could bloom? Have you apologized to the sky lately? Which memory have you been watering too much? You smile. The garden isn't passive, it's asking questions. Here's your fringe fact. There's evidence, faint fragmentary, that the sleeping gardens were once equipped with sound roots underground clay tubes designed to transmit soft melodies through the soil itself. Gardeners claimed certain flowers only open to the sound of flutes or wind chimes. Whether that's true or just poetic gardening lore, it definitely explains the occasional flute-shaped holes near some tree trunks. You stop at a fountain not for drinking, but for listening. The water falls in spirals, not streams. And when you lean in close, you hear voices in the splash. Not words exactly, more like tone emotion, the whisper of someone remembering you kindly. A small sign nearby reads, "Let the water forget you so it can dream you better next time." You dip your fingers into the basin. It's cool, but not cold, inviting. You press the moisture gently onto your forehead. No ritual suggested, it just feels right. Then comes the scent, again jasmine earth, a touch of sleep. The garden hums, not literally, but in the way it breathes. Slow, full, ready to be quiet with you. You walk a little farther, then pause at a clearing where a stone circle sits beneath hanging lanterns filled with fireflies. Cushions await. No one speaks here. It's known as the silent ring. You take your seat, close your eyes. The others around you, 6, maybe 7, do the same. No rules, no timer, just presence. And slowly, gently, the garden sleeps. And so do you. You wake or maybe just rise from the cushion, without ever quite remembering when you drifted off. The garden behind you rustles gently, almost sighing in approval. Your footsteps find a new path, now one edged in frost-colored moss that crunches so quietly. It feels like it's respecting the dream you just had. The air is thinner here, higher. You're climbing, though there's no rush. The trail curves up the side of a hill where the grass shortens and the wind thickens, carrying the clean mineral scent of cold clouds. And just when your legs begin to notice the incline, you crest the rise and see it. A loom, enormous wooden, sturdy enough to survive 1,000 storms. It's anchored to the peak by iron rings hammered into the stone rings, etched with weather symbols and half-faded names. And seated at the loom is the cloud weaver. She's not young, not old either, timeless in that deeply suspicious way certain forest witches and unbothered librarians tend to be. Her robe is made of scraps threads dyed in shades of sky-pale dawn storm gray lightning-struck lilac. She doesn't look up. You approach quietly watching as her shuttle slides through the weft. The cloth she's creating is not cloth at all, it's translucent, always in motion. The wind doesn't disturb it, it belongs to the wind. Sit, she says, voice rough as dry leaves. Watch carefully, this next bit's a cirrus. You sit, naturally. This is no ordinary textile. She's weaving weather, or at least the story of weather. Each thread represents a breath of sky mist from a forgotten village thunderclouds, from a boy's tantrum snowfall that arrived early because someone forgave too soon. Historians still argue whether the cloud weaver was a metaphor, a guild, or a solitary artist obsessed with meteorology and fabric. But at least 3 14th century manuscripts mention a woman on a hilltop who could gather clouds into stories and sky into silence. You watch her work. The loom hums as she threads a line of what looks like blue smoke followed by a ribbon of ash. That's fog from a night when no one could sleep, she mutters. I keep those for the edges. Next comes a golden strand. It twitches when touched, like it remembers lightning. She weaves it through, then knots it in place with what looks suspiciously like the thread from a kite. Here's your quirky fact. One preserved swatch of cloud-weave cloth in a museum appears to change color based on humidity. Some believe it was made using silk, soaked in storm water, and goat's milk then dried in moonlight. Others say that's nonsense. You're not sure who's right, but the cloth you're watching now certainly isn't obeying any known physics. The weaver offers you a strand soft as mist, nearly invisible, and invites you to try a line. You hesitate. She shrugs. It's not like you'll break the sky. You weave, badly. The strand bunches tangles, then somehow ties itself into a little knot shaped like a question mark. Huh, she says, eyeing it. Might be useful. The sky's been too sure of itself lately. She lets you tie off the row and run your fingers across the growing tapestry. It feels like memory. Not your own, but someone else's gentle wind blown just slightly sad. You ask what she's making. A blanket, she replies. For whom? She glances at you. The next person who forgets what the stars are for. You don't press. Before you leave, she gives you a scrap of discarded thread. For your pillow, she says. Might soften the harder dreams. You tuck it into your sleeve, rise, and bow not out of obligation, but because the hill, the wind, the loom. They all feel like something worth bowing to. You descend the slope slowly, the wind wrapping around you like something woven and deliberate. The clouds above pulse softly, as if proud of their own design. And behind you the shuttle keeps sliding the sky being stitched one quiet breeze at a time. As you descend from the cloud weaver's hill, the landscape begins to shift again, subtly, patiently, like a dream changing shape just before waking. The air grows warmer, more fragrant, and every step feels like it was chosen for you long before your arrival. The trees here are spaced far apart, their trunks wide and gnarled like storybook elders. Their branches bend in odd directions, not broken, just bowed. And in the soil around them, tiny glowing pebbles are scattered like breadcrumbs from a forgotten ceremony. You follow them. The path leads to a low clearing, rimmed by stones arranged in loose spirals like the whorls of a snail shell. In the center stands a peculiar sight, an old man hunched over a garden bed with no plants. He's digging into dry earth with a wooden spoon, carefully placing small polished stones shaped like stars. He doesn't greet you. He simply points to an empty patch of soil beside him and a little woven basket filled with tiny carvings, each one shaped like a constellation. Some recognizable Orion Ursa Major, others you've never seen, or maybe just never noticed. This is the starseeder guardian of a ritual that predates even writing the quiet planting of night skies into the earth. You kneel beside him, taking in the hush of the place. The ground smells faintly of citrus and coal. Each movement is deliberate. No one speaks. You don't need to. According to scattered oral traditions, certain ancient cultures believed that stars were born from below. The constellations didn't just appear, they were cultivated. This garden, it said, was one of many hidden sites where stars were planted, their symbols buried beneath layers of ash salt and whisper-soaked soil. Historians still argue whether the practice was symbolic astronomical or some sort of celestial performance art. One fringe theory suggests the gardens were used to teach seasonal sky movements, like a cosmic calendar carved into dirt. Another argues that it was grief work, that each buried star was a person remembered. You choose a carving, at random a small spiraling figure with no name. As you lower it into the soil, something strange happens. The breeze stills. The birds fall silent. For a breath, maybe two, the sky seems to lean in. The man nods satisfied and begins to hum. It's not a melody. Not quite. More like an echo that never found its origin. He tells you, in a voice like a chair creaking in a quiet room, that each star you plant comes back to visit once in your lifetime. Might not say hello, he shrugs. But you'll know. He hands you a small trowel carved from moonstone. This one's for wishes that never wanted to come true. He adds with a wry smile. You plant another star, this one shaped like an open eye. It fits in your palm like it was waiting there. Here's your fringe fact. In some indigenous Arctic mythologies, stars are seen as ancestral footprints, markers of where those before you walked across the dome of sky. And planting star symbols in earth was believed to keep the ancestors from drifting too far. You and the man work in tandem now, planting in silence, matching rhythm with breath. The soil grows studded with glints of stone and symbol a field of potential light. As twilight deepens, fireflies begin to rise from the earth, not hundreds, just a few blinking in time with your heartbeat. Or maybe his. Or maybe the garden's. Before you leave, he presses a single star into your hand, this one smooth, dark, and undecorated. For your pocket, he says. Or your pillow, just somewhere soft. You stand, bow slightly. He doesn't watch you go. He's already kneeling again, digging a small hole for what looks like a tiny carved thundercloud. And behind you, the stars you've planted wait not to be wished upon, but to be remembered. The stars don't follow you, not exactly, but there's a sense that some of them are aware. Not watching, not judging, just aware. Like old friends you forgot you'd met. You continue along a path made of worn slate tiles, each etched faintly with moon phases. Waxing, waning new full over and over again. The rhythm is comforting, predictable, quietly eternal. Then the final structure comes into view. A single round chamber built into a hill half above ground, half buried in soil. No guards, no signs, no urgency. Just a single flame glowing through a small window, steady, golden patient. You walk down a ramp carved in spirals until you reach the arched entrance. Inside the chamber is circular, low-ceilinged, and utterly still. The walls are lined with mirrors, not for vanity, but for memory. Each one fogged slightly as though it had just witnessed a sigh. At the center of the room on a pedestal of black stone sits a candle. The last candle. It's not dramatic, not towering, just ordinary in size, maybe 6 inches high, but it burns with a steady flame that doesn't flicker even as the air around it stirs. A woman stands beside it, older, robed in gray, her face lined not with age, but with restraint, like someone who has waited for a very long time and never complained once. She speaks quietly. This flame is said to be the last one lit before silence overtakes the world. You're not sure what she means, but your body accepts the weight of her words before your mind does. According to legend, this candle was lit from the final spark of a dying star. Others say it was the first flame ever given by the sun to humankind, passed down hand to hand unbroken. Every time it flickered, someone whispered a story into it. Every time it flared, someone forgave something. Historians, of course, scoff. They argue whether this flame was a symbolic ritual, a perpetual oil lamp, or a clever trick involving mirrors and well-trained firekeepers. But the woman here, she just watches it, listens to it. And in this room, honestly, the debate doesn't matter. The walls are covered in carvings, but not words. Just moments. A hand letting go of another. A child pressing a leaf into a book. A bird flying toward a cloud shaped like its mother. all tiny, all precise. You're invited to sit. You do. The cushion beneath you is warm, worn, clearly used by many others. The flame crackles once, just once, and you feel it in your ribs. Here's a fringe legend for your collection. Some say that if you watch the last candle long enough, it shows you a memory you forgot you had. Others say it doesn't show your memory at all, just one you needed to know existed. You stare, the flame shifts. You see nothing, but you feel something. Maybe a voice that once told you you were enough. Maybe a night when silence felt like safety, not punishment. Maybe just the reminder that being still doesn't mean being empty. The woman offers you a smaller candle and a match. Light it from this, she says. Take it with you. You hesitate. What if you ruin it? What if the flame disappears? She smiles. It never does. You light the match, touch it to your candle, and the flame jumps not dramatically, just gently, like a hug you weren't expecting. Before you go, she touches your shoulder. This world forgets, she says. Carry this for those who can't. You walk slowly up the spiral ramp, candle in hand, its glow softening the shadows along the way. The air is cooler now, still, peaceful. Outside, the stars above are clear, and the world for once doesn't demand anything from you. Not words, not speed, not purpose, just presence. You breathe, you blink, you keep walking. The flame in your hand steady as your heart. The air is velvet now. The stars blink slower. Your thoughts stretch and drift soft-edged, untethered. You've carried stories tonight, not heavy ones, not loud ones, just quiet echoes from gentle places that rarely make the pages of history. A breath here, a whisper there, a path not taken, but followed by moonlight and instinct. All of it soft, all of it enough. The flame in your hand flickers not out of fear, but recognition. It knows rest is near. You do too. You walk without needing to know where the path leads. The world is hushed, the kind of hush that arrives only after everything urgent has gone to sleep. Even your questions seem satisfied, as if they've been tucked into bed with tea and lullabies. Your muscles are loose now, your breath slower. The sky somehow seems closer. And the stars. They don't demand awe. Tonight they just watch quietly like friends waiting at the edge of sleep. If there's a lesson here, it isn't carved in stone or whispered by monks. It's sewn into silence, wrapped around the warmth of remembering that gentleness has always been waiting not behind greatness, but beneath it. Let your breath lengthen now. Let the thoughts unravel. You're safe. You're here. You're enough. The candle glows on the nightstand of your mind, steady and small. You close your eyes, or maybe just forget to open them again. The stories will wait. The silence is ready. Sleep well.